There is a specific moment that many people quietly dream of, a cinematic milestone in the movie of their financial lives. You imagine logging into your banking app or your brokerage account, the screen glowing in the palm of your hand, and seeing a comma, maybe two commas. You imagine seeing a specific number, let's call it the number, that you have arbitrarily decided represents the finish line. For years, you have told yourself a very simple story. When I hit that number, the knot in my stomach will untie. When I hit that number, the low-level hum of anxiety that plays in the background of my daily life will finally go silent. I will be safe. I will be secure. But then, something strange happens. You hit the number. Maybe it's $100,000. Maybe it's $1 million. You look at the screen. You feel a momentary rush of dopamine, a fleeting sense of accomplishment that lasts perhaps an hour, maybe a day. And then, the feeling fades. The knot in the stomach tightens again. The hum of anxiety returns, sometimes even louder than before. You find yourself checking the account not to celebrate it, but to guard it. You suddenly realize that the only thing more stressful than not having money is the terrifying prospect of losing the money you have finally managed to accumulate. This is the great paradox of modern personal finance. We are saving more than ever before, or at least we are trying to. Yet the subjective feeling of security seems to be retreating further toward the horizon. We are running faster, sweating more, and denying ourselves more, only to feel like we are standing still. If you have ever felt this specific type of confusion, this disconnect between your net worth and your self-worth, or between your bank balance and your peace of mind, you are not crazy and you are certainly not alone. You are experiencing a systemic and psychological phenomenon that isn't discussed enough. Just a quick note before we dive into the mechanics of this. I am an educator, not a financial advisor. We are going to talk about money, psychology, and economic history today, but this is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as individual financial advice for your specific situation. To understand why saving more doesn't always translate to feeling safer, we have to look at the machinery beneath the surface of the American economy. We need to look at how the definition of safety has been rewritten without most of us noticing. Let's start with a metaphor. Imagine you are trying to build a house to shelter yourself from a storm. In the past, the materials for this house were provided to you. You showed up to work, you did your job for 30 or 40 years, and at the end of it, the company, often in conjunction with strong union contracts, built the house for you. This was the era of the defined benefit plan, the pension. If we look at data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in the early 1980s, the majority of private sector workers with a retirement plan had a pension. The deal was simple. You trade your labor now, and the corporation guarantees you a paycheck until you die. The risk of the market crashing or interest rates falling, or you living until you are 105 years old, that risk belonged to the employer. You didn't have to be an investor. You didn't have to understand asset allocation. You just had to show up. Fast forward to today, that model has been almost entirely dismantled. It has been replaced by the defined contribution plan, primarily the 401k. This shift didn't just change the paperwork, it fundamentally shifted the center of gravity for financial risk in America. The risk was transferred from the balance sheets of massive corporations and the federal government directly onto the kitchen tables of ordinary families. Now, you are the pension fund manager, you are the actuary, you are the investment committee. And if the market crashes the year before you retire, or if inflation spikes, or if you live 20 years longer than you expected, that is entirely your problem. This structural shift is the first reason why seeing a large number in your savings account doesn't cure the anxiety. Deep down, your brain understands that the burden of performance is entirely on you. $1 million in a 401k is not a promise of income. It is a pile of potential energy that you have to manage, harvest, and protect for decades. The pension was a paycheck. The 401k is a project. And projects come with the possibility of failure. This is why you can have $1 million and still feel insecure, because you have moved from a world of guarantees to a world of probabilities.
However, the structural shift is only half the story. The other half takes place inside the human mind. We have to talk about the psychology of the number. There is a concept in behavioral finance and psychology known as the hedonic treadmill. Usually, this is used to describe lifestyle creep, the idea that as you make more money, you buy nicer things and your baseline for happiness resets, so you never actually feel happier. But there is a parallel concept we might call the security treadmill. When you have $10,000, you worry about your car breaking down. When you have $100,000, you worry about a layoff. When you have $1 million, you worry about the geopolitical stability of the global markets, tax policy changes, and the long-term erosion of the dollar. The object of the worry changes, but the worry itself remains constant. This is largely because of a cognitive bias identified by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky called loss aversion. Loss aversion is the human tendency to feel the pain of a loss about twice as intensely as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Evolutionarily, this makes sense. If you're a hunter-gatherer, finding extra food is nice, but losing your food supply is fatal. We are hardwired to prioritize defense over offense. The problem is that as you save more money, you have more to lose. When you are young and broke, a 20% market correction might mean you lose $2,000. It's annoying, but it's not life-altering. When you are 50 years old and have $1 million saved, a 20% correction is $200,000. That is a house. That is 4 years of median household income gone in a month. Even though you are technically richer, the feelings feel astronomically higher. The more you save, the larger the target becomes on your back, and your brain, trying to protect you, ramps up the anxiety to ensure you don't make a mistake. This leads us to a dangerous intersection where the economic reality meets the psychological reality. We often attempt to solve this anxiety by hoarding cash. We think, if I just keep more money in the bank where I can see it, where the number doesn't fluctuate, then I will feel safe. We conflate volatility with risk. We think that the market goes up and down, it is risky, and because a savings account stays flat, it is safe. But this is where the silent thief enters the room. We need to talk about inflation, not just as a headline on the news, but as a mathematical force that is actively dissolving your security.
According to data from the Federal Reserve and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the long-term average inflation rate in the United States hovers around 2 to 3%, though we have obviously seen periods where it spikes much higher. It is easy to dismiss 2 or 3% as a rounding error, but let's play that out over the timeline of a retirement. If you retire today with a nest egg that generates $50,000 of purchasing power and inflation runs at just 3%, in 24 years, the purchasing power of that money is cut in half. You would need $100,000 just to buy the same groceries, pay the same property taxes, and heat the same home. If you react to your financial anxiety by hoarding cash in a savings account yielding less than inflation, you are guaranteeing a loss. You are choosing the certainty of slow erosion over the uncertainty of growth. This is the safety trap. The safer you try to play it by avoiding the volatility of the market, the more danger you are actually in. You are like a swimmer trying to stay safe by hugging a block of ice that is slowly melting. It feels solid right now, but it cannot support you forever. So, if saving more money doesn't automatically fix the anxiety, and if playing it too safe actually increases your risk, what is the solution? How do we actually achieve that feeling of security? It requires a shift in mental models. We need to stop thinking about net worth and start thinking about cash flow. Net worth is a vanity metric. It's a snapshot in time. It's the number that makes you feel good or bad when you look at it. But you cannot buy groceries with net worth. You cannot pay property taxes with a snapshot. You pay for your life with cash flow. The transition from financial anxiety to financial peace happens when you stop focusing on the size of the pile and start focusing on the reliability of the stream. This is where we have to embrace the boring, unsexy, yet profoundly effective world of diversified asset allocation. The goal is to build an engine that produces cash flow that outpaces inflation. This usually means owning a piece of the global economy. When you buy a broad-based index fund, whether it's tracking the S&P 500 or the total U.S. stock market, you are not gambling on stocks. You are buying a small slice of the productive capacity of human civilization. You are buying the companies that make the toothpaste, ship the packages, write the software, and pave the roads. Historically, despite wars, recessions, pandemics, and political crises, the aggregate earnings of these companies have grown faster than inflation. Why? Because corporations are inflation pass-through vehicles. When the price of raw materials goes up, Coca-Cola raises the price of a can of soda. When wages go up, Microsoft raises the price of its software subscription. By owning the equity, you are on the side of the table that sets the prices, not just the side that pays them. But here's the catch, and this is why the anxiety persists for so many. To get that inflation-beating growth, you have to accept volatility. You have to accept that there will be years where your account value drops. This is the price of admission for long-term security. The market charges a toll for wealth creation, and that toll is paid in fear. If you are not willing to pay the toll, if you panic and sell when the market drops, you don't get to cross the bridge to financial freedom. So, how do we construct a portfolio that allows us to sleep at night? We do it by decoupling our short-term needs from our long-term growth. This is often called the bucket strategy, or simply asset-liability matching. The money you need for rent, food, and bills in the next 2 to 3 years should not be in the market. That money belongs in cash, high-yield savings, or short-term treasury bills. It is there to be boring. It is there to be the anchor. When the market crashes, you don't panic because you know your grocery money for the next 36 months is sitting safely in a government-insured account. You don't have to sell your stocks while they are down. The money you need 5, 10, or 20 years from now, that is the money that belongs in the market. That is the money that needs to be fighting inflation. By separating these timelines, you give yourself permission to ignore the day-to-day fluctuations of the stock market. You stop looking at your account value as one giant number that defines your worth and start seeing it as different tools for different jobs. But there is a deeper layer here, one that goes beyond the math and the asset allocation. We have to address the definition of enough. In a capitalist system designed to maximize consumption, we are constantly bombarded with messaging that tells us we need more: a bigger house, a newer car, a more luxurious vacation. The goalpost is always moving. If you do not consciously plant your own goalpost, society will keep moving it 10 yards further down the field every time you get close. There is a fascinating body of research regarding the relationship between income and happiness. For a long time, the famous study suggested happiness plateaued around $75,000 a year. Newer data suggests it might keep going up past that, but the rate of return diminishes significantly. The difference in life satisfaction between someone struggling to eat and someone making $80,000 is massive. The difference between someone making $400,000 and someone making $4 million is surprisingly small, and in some metrics, non-existent. The people who feel the most secure are not necessarily the ones with the highest net worth. They are the ones with the lowest gap between their needs and their means. If you spend $5,000 a month and you have a portfolio that generates $7,000 a month passively, you are infinitely more secure than someone who spends $50,000 a month but has a portfolio that generates $40,000. The second person is technically richer in absolute terms, but they are running a deficit. They are fragile. The first person is robust. Security comes from the gap. It comes from the margin. And you have 2 ways to widen that margin. You can earn more, or you can need less. The financial industry focuses entirely on earning more, better returns, higher savings rates, side hustles. And those are important, but the superpower of the truly wealthy is the ability to define enough at a level that is easily sustainable.
This brings us to the concept of financial independence, often abbreviated as FI.
The true definition of financial independence is not having a Ferrari. It is having the agency to say no. It is the ability to walk away from a toxic job, to weather a medical emergency without bankruptcy, to take time off to care for a sick parent. When you view money as a tool for agency rather than a scorecard of status, the anxiety begins to dissipate. Let's look at the data on retirees. The Employee Benefit Research Institute consistently finds that retirees who have a guaranteed stream of income, historically from pensions, now potentially from annuities or a very carefully managed withdrawal strategy, report higher satisfaction than those with just a lump sum of cash. Why? Because the lump sum triggers that loss aversion we talked about. Every dollar you spend feels like you're depleting your life force, but a stream of income feels like a renewable resource. So if we want to solve the paradox of saving more but feeling less secure, we have to simulate that stream. We have to build our own personal pension fund. This involves understanding the safe withdrawal rate. The most famous version of this is the 4% rule, derived from the Trinity study. The premise is that if you have a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds, you can withdraw 4% of the initial value in the first year, adjust that dollar amount for inflation every subsequent year, and historically, you would not have run out of money over a 30-year retirement in the vast majority of market scenarios. Now, there is plenty of debate in the financial community about whether 4% is too high in a world of lower bond yields or higher equity valuations. Some say 3.5% is safer. Some say dynamic spending less when the market is down, allows for 5%. But the specific percentage matters less than the concept. The concept is that you are converting your pile of assets into a paycheck. When you start to view your savings not as a dragon's hoard of gold to be guarded, but as a generator that produces a paycheck, the psychology shifts. You stop obsessing over whether the market is up or down today, and you start asking, is the generator still running? Is the dividend yield consistent? Is the interest arriving? But even with the math sorted out, we have to confront the ultimate source of insecurity, the unknown. No amount of money can completely eliminate the uncertainty of life. You can save $5 million and still get a diagnosis that money can't fix. You can build the perfect portfolio and still face a societal collapse or a black swan event that defies all historical modeling. The pursuit of total security is a fool's errand. It is a form of neurosis. The goal should not be total invulnerability. The goal should be resilience. Resilience is different from stability. Stability means things don't change. Resilience means you can withstand change. A savings account is stable, but it isn't resilient against inflation. A stock portfolio is volatile, but it is resilient against the erosion of purchasing power over decades. To feel secure, you have to accept a degree of insecurity. You have to embrace the idea that the future is unknowable, and that is okay. You are building a boat that can handle rough seas, not trying to control the ocean. There is a powerful realization that often hits people who have been on this journey for a long time. They realized that the security they were looking for didn't come from the bank account balance hitting 7 figures. It came from the realization that they were competent. It came from the knowledge that they could live on less if they had to. It came from the skills they acquired, the relationships they built, and the resilience they developed. Your true net worth includes your human capital, your ability to work, to solve problems, to adapt. If the market goes to zero, that is a global catastrophe where money probably won't matter much anyway. But short of the apocalypse, your security lies in your adaptability. So let's go back to that moment where you're looking at your banking app. You see the number, it's higher than it was last year, but you still feel that twinge of fear. Instead of letting that fear drive you to hoard more cash or obsess over the charts, acknowledge it. Recognize it as an evolutionary artifact, a survival instinct that is misfiring in the modern world. Then zoom out. Look at the system you have built. Do you have an emergency fund in cash that covers the next few months of life? That is your shield against immediate chaos.
Do you have a diversified portfolio of low-cost index funds? That is your engine for long-term growth, your defense against inflation. Do you have a grasp on what your enough actually looks like? That is your compass. If you have those three things, you're doing better than the vast majority of people in history. The anxiety might never fully go away. Money is, after all, survival, but you can turn the volume down. You can stop viewing the number as a grade on your soul and start viewing it as fuel for your life. The trap is thinking that there is a magic number where the worry stops. There isn't. The worry stops when you trust the process you have built more than you fear the outcome. It stops when you realize that you are not just saving for a rainy day, you are building a climate-controlled shelter. Saving more is important, it is the foundation, but saving alone is just defense. To feel secure, you need to play offense. You need to own assets. You need to understand the system. And most importantly, you need to stop moving the goalpost on yourself. Because if you never define what winning looks like, you will remain on the treadmill forever, running towards a horizon that retreats with every step you take. And life, frankly, is too short for that. Ultimately, financial security is not a number, it is a feeling, and feelings are generated by the stories we tell ourselves. The story you need to tell yourself is not, "I need more to be safe," it is, "I have built a system that is resilient, I understand the risks, and I have defined what is enough." That is the only way to step off the treadmill and finally, truly walk on solid ground.